continue.
Yeah, I think everyone has to buy in on the recording.
Yep. Well, hi and welcome everyone. It's nice to see you. So today's meeting will be different than usual, just for anybody who might be watching. We're using this chance to hold an August meeting, which we don't usually. We won't be looking at a case review or trainings, but are going to spend more time just talking about our own group process and how we want to approach the work ahead. I'm going to be toggling back and forth between the agenda here. So the agenda is set here. Does anybody have any comments or concerns, any amendments to the agenda that they would like to make before approving it? So seeing none, I think we can just go ahead and move forward with the agenda as presented. We won't have any, so sorry, I am on the wrong, I'm in the wrong place. So I was realizing sort of as we went through the meeting last time, we sort of briefly introduced ourselves like in a very cursory way, but I thought it would be helpful for me to just know a little bit more about everyone, kind of like what brings you to the table, so we can kind of like arrive and hear just a little bit more about, you know, what brings you here to the CRB and sort of, you know, a little bit, tiny bit more about your background. So I was hoping we might be able to use our sort of opening comments for that. Just doesn't need to be long or formal or drawn out in any way, but it just, I feel the loss of not getting the chance to chat with people like before meetings or after meetings, or, you know, some of that more informal contact to get to know each other very well. So I thought if we could dedicate just a little bit of time to that, to go around, that would be helpful for me. So, and aside from this section where we'll kind of go around, I think the rest of the meeting, I'm hoping we can get by with a much more informal feel, like just kind of opening up the floor for people to chime in, and we'll hopefully just kind of move through things a little bit more organically. So for this first section, I don't mind, I'll just start and then kind of go around and call on people and tell you who's next. So, so I'm Lindsey Foltz, you all know that. When I was thinking about, you know, kind of what brings me to the CRB table, there's really kind of like three things. The first was getting kind of a front row seat to the police misconduct cases from, it's been a while now. So I've been living with these and the stories for almost 20 years at this point, but the Lara and Magana cases, which came up out of EPD, having a front row seat to those cases, hearing testimony from victim after victim, hearing, you know, literally hearing from people who I went to school with who were impacted by their, you know, predatory sexual behavior under the cover of uniform was a really impactful event in my younger life. And so I've been following police and police oversight in Eugene pretty much since then. I'm really thankful for a lot of the community members who have worked hard to bring us to where we are now with things like a civilian review board and the ability for us to do the kind of work that we do now. So that was definitely sort of the first impactful moment. The next thing is working for the City of Eugene as a human rights analyst, and then later on as a fair housing and community development analyst, just sitting with people's stories and then working with people inside the department and in the community, and you know, just understanding how much trust has been broken, but then also like seeing moments where I think there's been repair. So that's been an important part of bringing me here to this table. And then the third is living in the Balkans, and that's where I do my current research, and living in a place where really there isn't really effective police. It's vigilante justice, it's mafia justice, and it's really scary to live in that type of environment as well. So I feel, I don't know. Anyway, in other words, I have like this nuanced position. Like I've worked with people who come from a lot of different places who have had a lot of different types of experiences. And so I'd like to think that I carry that with me when I come to this table. And this is the kind of work that like always needs to be done, like it's never over. So I'm thankful also for all of you who are here doing this work that we get to continually do to make sure that these processes stay transparent and that we move things even maybe in more fruitful directions. So that's just a little bit about me. I'm going to basically just follow people around my screen. So Carolyn, you're to my right, and then Bernadette, you'll be after Carolyn.
I think what made me want to be on the CRB was I grew up in Eugene and I moved away. I also served in the Peace Corps in Eastern Europe, like Lindsey. So that the kind of, I had the same experience there of really seeing how corrupt society could be, and then coming back to the States and seeing just kind of how different it was, but how, I don't know, similar it can be also. I think it's been 3 years. So yeah, I guess politically everything was happening already when I was appointed here. Like Trump was already elected, and I just wanted to get involved somehow, and this was a way to get involved in my local community in a way that felt impactful and meaningful for me. So as a woman, I saw a lot of men at the table, and I wanted to be a woman, a female voice at the table. So that's part of what made me want to get involved. I think that's all for me.
Thanks, Carolyn and Bernadette. And then after that will be Bill.
Okay, so I moved to Eugene grew up in Portland, moved to Eugene after law school in Salem, and was working in the DA's office from 1991 to 2000, and then stayed home to raise kids. And when did Mark come to Eugene? 10 years ago, 9 years ago. So I started on the CRB 2 months after he started in the auditor's office. There was a lot of dysfunction in the auditor's office at that time. And so I was concerned about how oversight was going, given how what I think people thought and what people wanted in the system as a result of Laura and Magana, and put the civilian oversight into place, and kind of how it was actually happening. I didn't feel like it was actually working in the way that I think most people had hoped it would work. So I figured bringing in my background of being in the DA's office, knowing police officers from a variety of agencies, I had the ability to opportunity to see how officers in different agencies did things. And it didn't always go over well to say to an officer from agency A, agency B does it this way. Have you ever tried to do it that way? And kind of saw this as an opportunity to maybe have those conversations and have that input. And so I was on when we did the first community impact case. And so that was a real learning experience. And then I was off for a while for a variety of reasons, and then just felt like it was time to kind of get back involved in things. And so I applied to get back on. I think the one part of the oversight that I always thought was really super important is that it was the communication between the civilians and the police. That the police don't always have an opportunity to understand how civilians see things. And civilians don't always have the insight into the background and training of police officers and why they do things. So I felt like it was the CRB is an opportunity to let community members know, why are they doing it the way they're doing it? So I went through they used to have a Citizens Police Academy, went through that. And so I think I just always have looked at the CRB as the opportunity to have the communication go both ways. That was the most important part of the oversight, because whether you have oversight in place or not, I don't think that's going to stop bad behavior by officers that are going to have bad behavior. But it allows people that, just make mistakes to understand why the community sees that as a mistake. And so I think that's I think the most important thing. I was on the police commission for a couple of years. And I think, the difference in that, the police commission is it's just it's a talking board in that it gives information to the chief, but then the chief actually does what the chief wants to do. Whereas I feel like on the CRB, it's like we have the ability to be more impactful because our conversations go back and actually, I think sometimes change how people do their job. And every officer that has ever been involved in it, except for one, has come to a CRB meeting and seen a case reviewed, or especially their own case reviewed, felt like it was reviewed really well. And I'd like to keep that going, that they saw the value in what we do. And I think that's probably the most important part, is that it's one thing for the civilians in our community to see the value in what we do, but when the police also see the value in what we do, I think that's when it's really meaningful. That's it.
Thanks, Bernadette. Bill, and then Jose.
Hello, everyone. Hopefully you'll hear me. I'm having some Wi-Fi trouble here. I'm in Sud River, not at my usual spot. So, I was on the police commission for about 8 years and did a lot of the policy work and took us through President Obama's 21st policing and some of the changes there. And this was sort of a natural progression for me then to go to this side and look at how the officers are on the street and what the citizens feel that they're doing or not doing. And also always want to make sure that, because internal investigations, are always tough on the public to believe that they're getting the true story when sort of this narrative is done by the police department whenever they do an investigation. And so I like having this group of citizens that overlook and make sure that investigations are being done properly and honest and with integrity, and then looked at that way so we can get a fair shot at it. So thank you.
Thanks, Bill. So Jose, and then Michael.
Hi. So, I have a few interconnected reasons that I think, made me want to apply to this position. The first is that, I've had experiences witnessing the people I love brutalized by the police and security apparatus, and the loss of agency that you feel when you see that happen in what you perceive to be a pattern. So I've always felt like this would be an opportunity to feel like I have some kind of agency within that larger connected set of systems. Another thing was that my first real adulting job was with the Washington State Department of Corrections. I worked in the communications office, and spent a lot of time thinking about how to communicate the mission of community corrections to the citizens of the state of Washington. And I thought about community corrections as a meeting point between institutions, and how to increase communication and collaboration between both of those groups. And then I'm also currently writing a book on policing around the US-Mexico border right now for my job. And finally, I see this work connected to my ongoing activism with migrant justice initiatives. And yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Jose. Michael, and then Rick.
Yeah, so I'm Michael, and it's my second year on this board. So I grew up, I'm a first generation college graduate student, first generation college grad. I grew up in a community where most people went to work after high school as either topless dancers or used car salesmen. And there was, or you worked at the pawn shop. There wasn't a lot of space in between. And I went to college and graduate school and became a professor. And when I was in graduate school, this was, well, when I was in college, probably the most important event in my, my political intellectual life happened, which was the acquittal of police officers following the beating of Rodney King. And I went to graduate school the following year and decided that there was, began to learn about mass incarceration and the criminal justice system, and decided that whatever I did my dissertation on had to have something to do with that. So I wrote a dissertation on writings by prisoners from the 1970s and 1980s, Black and Latino prisoners. And the degree was in English, and so I ended up in an English department, but eventually moved to Oregon, back to Oregon. I grew up in Portland area, moved back to the Portland area, or to the Oregon area in Eugene to teach at the U of O in 2005. And in the ethnic studies department. And so in ethnic studies, I had the opportunity to broaden my teaching a bit from literature. And so I started teaching classes on race and incarceration, and eventually social equity and criminal justice, because the questions that students came to the class with, and the questions that I had, were broader than what I was able to answer by teaching literature written by prisoners. And so began to learn more about all aspects of the criminal justice system. And one of those classes gradually expanded to the point where it is now regularly 150 students and counts for the crime law and society major as well as the ethnic studies major. And that class was basically focused on cops, courts, corrections, and reentry. And the goal with that class originally was to help students understand some of the problems that existed with those, and get them to write policy briefs at the end of the class that would be recommending changes to it. Then Ferguson happened. And after Ferguson, both my students and my interests, well, first off, my students started coming into class where I wanted to get them by the end of class before. But also everyone's interest began to focus more heavily on policing and not just mass incarceration. And so that included myself. And so my current research is on policing, specifically on civilian oversight of policing, police commissions, auditors' offices, civilian review boards. And so 2 years ago, or a year and a half ago, I guess, I applied to be on both the police commission and the civilian review board, and advanced all the way to the end with both. And then unfortunately, during my interview with the mayor for the police commission, she informed me that I informed her that I had applied for both boards, and said, oh, but I guess I can't probably be on both. And she said, no. And so unfortunately for me, there were more than enough applicants for the police commission and not enough applicants for the civilian review board. So I'm on the civilian review board. All that turned out fine, because I've crafted a project that's specifically looking at civilian review, and as Mark knows, comparatively in a couple of different locations, including British Columbia. So Los Angeles County's board committee, Civilian Oversight Committee, which is fairly new, 2016. And which is one of the few that's a county level board overlooking sheriff's departments. And then British Columbia, which has province-wide office, police complaints office, that overlooks a number of different departments throughout the province. And so I'm looking at those three different levels and also the different jurisdictions. But then another thing happened, which was George Floyd's murder. And so what I got an offer from Texas, so I have to compress my research, and COVID also happened, so I can't travel. So I have refocused that project onto Eugene civilian oversight specifically, and I'll be collecting data on that this year. And so I'm super interested in everything that happens, and looking forward to learning more about that. But also another sort of personal aspect for why I wanted to get more involved, as Carolyn said, post 2016 election, I felt a need for different kinds of representation on committees and boards and in city government. And it will come as a surprise to no one that Eugene in particular has a history of the same kinds of people being in the same positions over and over again, occupying the same boards, the same councils, the same commissions, year after year after year, decade after decade. Either the same individuals in those positions over and over again, or people with similar backgrounds, similar political interests, similar upbringings, and similar professional backgrounds. So this board, for example, right, I think that everyone here is JD or PhD, is that right, or MA? Yeah, gotcha. Right, so that level of similarity on these boards and commissions and whatnot is probably not good for our city. And so as someone who hopes to return here after my Texas stint and to retire, I would like to be a part of helping to improve our city. Thank you.
Thank you. And Rick?
Hi, everyone. I grew up in Seattle and actually moved to Portland when I was a teenager, and graduated from high school there and came down to Oregon and never left. After going to law school, I worked for an outfit called Jaquia and Wheatley, and we did primarily trial work, and I did that for the last 48 years. Early in my career, I was fortunate enough to become involved in preparing and trying cases involving police conduct. Eugene Police Department, Lane County Sheriff, Lynn County Sheriff, Benton County Sheriff, and Oregon State Police. And so I saw a number of cases from the standpoint of defending those police officers. And when I got ready to retire, one of my former partners is John Kilcullen, whose son Chris was a police officer here in Eugene who was killed in the line of duty by an individual who shot him under the lip of his, or behind the lip of his bulletproof vest, and killed him instantly. That was back in 2011. And that left a lasting impression on me. He was an outstanding individual, was what I would call the perfect guy to be on the police force. And I felt like it was kind of one of the things I should do, is to become involved, to provide him and others with the perspective of having defended the cases. I may be on the wrong side of the political coin in with a lot of your respects, but I try and bring to this table a perspective of providing the opposite side of the coin on some of these cases. And I'm still mindful of when we have bad situations arise, and feel that it's important that we provide the structure and the process so that the citizens can have an input into the system of policing and the process of policing. And so, you know, while I may not be on the right side of the political coin, I feel like I can provide the right kind of influence on what we decide and provide what I think as honestly as I can. Thanks.
Thanks, Rick. I appreciate you humoring me in doing that. It's really helpful. One of the things I've appreciated, I don't think there's a right side or a wrong side, Rick. One thing I've appreciated having sat on this board for a while is that there is often divergence in our conclusions, in our assumptions, in our lenses. But I think that makes this group unique, and I appreciate that everyone comes and does the work and is committed to having a transparent public process. And so I actually think our disagreements make this potentially even a more legitimate and strong board. So thank you all. In less interesting duties, the next thing on our agenda is to approve the minutes from the previous meeting. Does anybody have any amendments that they would like to make to the minutes? I don't see any, so I'm going to say we can approve the minutes as written and move right along. So for the next few items, there'll be a combination of me trying to provide a little background information, opening up the floor for discussion, and then if there are any decision points that we come to, entertaining motions and then voting on what we'd like to do. My intention in providing the information is not so much to say that this is the way it should be, just to provide some context for how things have been done. And then I'm very, looking forward to everybody's ideas on how we would like to move forward as a group for this year. So the first item is just about our meeting schedule. So typically we meet on the second Tuesday of the month. That schedule has largely been determined by all the other public meetings that also go on, other boards and commissions, city council, and those types of things, so that the public meetings don't have too much overlap, and that then there's some flow between, for example, the CRB and then the police commission, which typically meets right afterward. In terms of the annual calendar, typically we've met about 10 times a year. We usually take a break when council breaks in August and then either in December or January. But year to year, that's been different. The minimum that we need to meet our ordinance requirements is quarterly. And as you can see, this year we've decided to meet in August and so have departed from the past. But I thought it might be helpful if we could just talk now about if there are changes that we might like to make to the meeting schedule for this year, or if there are any other comments about that type of scheduling. And like I said at the beginning, I just assume that we can kind of do this informally. So if you want to talk, just raise your hand and start talking, as long as we're not talking over each other. I don't need to be super involved in the moderating. So does anybody have any questions or concerns or things you'd like to talk about in terms of our annual meeting calendar? I see Bernadette shaking your head like, no, like, please, let's not talk about this.
No, it wasn't to please, let's not talk about this. It's, I think it's fine. I mean, how we've done it. Now we haven't, I think that always the problem that I have seen over the years that I've done this is our fall times are challenging because we have new members come in for the first meeting of July. We take off August. October, November is often with the police commission. And so it's that part of the scheduling that I think is always a little bit challenging. And then when we vote on our board, I mean, I think there's some things that aren't quite, the best, but I'm not sure which of those things we can change. But as far as just the meeting times, I mean, I think it's fine. I like the idea of always taking off August and December or January. I think it just works well.
Thanks, Bernadette. Does anybody else have questions or comments about the meeting schedule? I see Rick.
Yeah, I feel like we need to have the 10 meetings that cover case reviews. I also think we ought to include another 1 or 2 meetings for training sessions. And that may be covered in another area of the agenda, but I do think that we need to make a special meeting for training. Maybe have a couple of subjects for that meeting or those meetings. And I also think we're going to be faced with additional meetings for all of us on the community impact cases. I think we're going to have to face that, and we're going to have to program that in. And it seems to me that we're going to have to add those to the normal schedule.
I like the idea of having 10 kind of general case review meetings, and then adding in these trainings and this sort of meeting, the process meetings on top of that. I don't think this has been floated out there, but I don't like the idea of changing one of our case review meetings into a process meeting or a training meeting. Not saying that anyone has said that, but I think we should aim for at least 10 case reviews a year. I think that has felt good in the past. I know it's been floated to review more cases, and I appreciate that, and I think that would be helpful if it would be possible. I know that we're getting to a different part of the agenda, so that's all I'm going to say for that right now.
Thanks, Carolyn. Yeah, and both Carolyn and Rick, I think like there will be overlap between these items. So I think that it's great that you surface those now, because that will make it helpful as we move forward. So far what I'm hearing is that we feel comfortable doing at least 10 meetings. We feel like that's useful for making sure we can do enough case reviews. And I'm hearing support for additional meeting times that are separate from our monthly meetings to do some more intensive training, and we can talk more about that later, but I'll just, flag that. And then that's a good point, Rick, that for the fall, because of the community impact case, it's likely that we will need to add additional meetings in addition to the typical monthly meeting to accommodate the community impact case and make sure that we have the time to do that. Does anybody have any concerns or concerns with not holding a meeting either in December or January? And I guess I would love it if we could walk out knowing, for example, we're not going to meet in January or whatever, and then flex if necessary, but just so that staff kind of knows, and so that we, as we're setting the agendas for the cases that we're going to review, we can kind of try to fit that in. Does anybody have thoughts on the December/January break?
I generally would rather take December off than January, but I'm what's the word? I don't know that it will happen this year because of the impact, the community impact. I feel like that will probably still be going on into December, maybe not, I don't know. So if we're voting, I'd rather have December than January off. And if that's an opportunity that we actually end up with.
If it matters, December would be the 8th, so it would be really early, which then means January would really be early, which would be the 5th. So I guess my preference would be the 5th, taking January instead of December. Normally I would want December.
It would be the 12th because we're the second Tuesday, right?
Oh, sorry, the 12th, right. But the December one would be pretty early. And so my preference.
And then sorry, I see Bill's hand waving.
Yeah, so I guess I don't know your workload, but isn't there enough cases that we would have meetings every month to review? I guess is it just a convenience, or is it just that there isn't work to be done in those 2 months?
So there's always work to be done. We could meet every week, and there would still be work to be done, which is why we're talking about it. I think in the past, most boards and commissions take off when council takes off. They have breaks. And I don't know all of the background behind like staffing choices and all those other things that go into that. But I think it's a good point that we could meet monthly and not take breaks, and there's plenty of work to do.
I wonder if from a staff point of view, a January meeting would be difficult, because that would mean preparing things to send out to us in late December and very early January. Whereas a December meeting, right, although that still bumps up against the Thanksgiving holiday at the end of November, there's at least a little bit more freedom, perhaps. I'm looking at Leia to see if there's a nodding there. That November might be an easier month in which to prepare casework for us than December. So if my preference would be to take the January one off if we're taking one off.
I think that's a solid point, Michael. I think, we will be prepared whenever you guys want to meet. And we definitely have cases for review. I think it's also, what I'm hearing is that you guys maybe want to do more meetings that are just case review and not the training topics and everything else. So it seems to me, and I would want to check with Mark and Vicki and Beatrice on this, but those are, especially with Zoom, they're a little easier to throw together. We can get you, the case material is the significant output of time from staff, from Vicki. And so that is not insignificant at all. But if we don't have to do the training and we don't have to find a room and all of those things, we can make it happen whenever you guys want to. But I just want to say that's a very good point, Michael, that we can probably get cases to you easier in December. And Vicki, you can text me if I'm wrong on that.
Go ahead, Bernadette, I see your hand.
We also, and I can't remember if we have a set month that we usually do it, where we, instead of doing the bigger cases, we do the small complaints, where we do like anywhere from 3 to 5 of those. It might make sense that would be put on the July docket, because I think a lot of little cases for an oncoming board member to read like some small cases and understand maybe the process a little bit better and how we discuss them might be easier with a smaller case than with a bigger case. I don't know if that's exactly calendar related, but I just think that jumping into one of these big case files, if you haven't had, especially if we get rid of any training, it's like you've got people coming on board and they meet with Leia and kind of get an idea of what the CRB is about. But I think that might be an idea as well, just to toss out there.
Well, and if I may, so far it's taken the police a little bit longer to adjudicate cases, because they have a lot of things going on, like all of us. And sometimes I think the doubling up on the cases, because we have a number of use of force cases where we've at least disagreed with the chain of command. And so if we just do one at a time, I think they have a tendency to get stale. And so sometimes doing 2 of them would be helpful. In addition, there's both legislated and bargained timeframes on a community impact case, which is going to consume a huge amount of your time when we get to that point. So I think that doubling up on cases and not having the training sessions, unless there's something you want, would work. We can also have a training, as someone suggested, a training session that's completely independent, whether it's, whether we call it a retreat and it's several different issues or things like that, we can do that as well. But we have a probably since I've been here, since 2009, we're stacked up on allegation cases, and certainly ones that I'm very interested in hearing your perspectives, because again, there's some difference of opinions on whether the allegations should be sustained or not. So, and whether it's December or January, I don't know. If we knew when Vicky's Thanksgiving, sometimes she travels for Thanksgiving because she does the heavy lifting for putting case files together, because it is a lot of work, especially now because of the body worn cameras and things like that. It's a lot more voluminous than it used to be. So I think either way, if I had to choose, I think it's easier to work in December and not in January for the reasons that Michael stated as well. So, but we're pretty stacked up on cases that I certainly am interested in the board taking a look at.
So I think it sounds like we can move ahead with. Would people like to go through? Oh yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Well, I guess I think we don't need, I would say we don't take a month off. I mean, that's just going to be my vote. Is I don't understand why we're taking a month off, but there's plenty of work to be done, and I think we owe it to do things timely, and we only meet once. I mean, we may meet more with the upcoming stuff, but really we're only scheduled to meet once a month, and so.
So just to make this a little easier, I think I'm trying to think of like the transcription process. Can somebody propose a motion for the months that we would like to meet over the course of the next 12-month period? So like between now and August 22, and then we can vote on that so it's in the record.
We start with what I understand to be Bill's suggestion, which is a motion that we don't take a month off. And then if that fails, we can then move on to which motion. Sorry, just offering a suggestion.
Sure. So that would be that between now and next August, we meet monthly. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Someone, and it's Michael, you want to second that?
I'll go ahead and, yeah, I'll second if that's.
Great. And so everyone in favor? You just raise your hand so I can see you. I think we're all here. Anybody opposed? I can't see Rick actually. So Rick, are you in favor or opposed?
I am in favor.
Okay, great. So the motion carries. So we will meet monthly for the next 12 months to do case review meetings. Is that, am I accurately understanding that's what we're moving? Okay, awesome. We've slated some time on the agenda to also discuss the issue of apportionment of meeting time. So that kind of naturally transitions us into that. It sounds like there is support from people to spend our monthly meeting times doing case reviews and more case reviews than we have done in the past, and to add additional meetings for training type issues. So that's an idea that's been floated by a few people. Does anybody else want to chime in with their thoughts on that issue? Oh, I see Leah's hand. I see Bill.
I just want to say the training topics is part of our ordinance. So I understand they can get dry, and I am totally willing to talk about how often we do them and what we do. And Mark and I and Beatrice and Vicky have tried various things to get input on what you guys want training on, and we're 100% open. But yes, we do have to train you. Like, we have an ordinance requirement that it has to get done, just so everyone knows. We're not just doing this to torture you.
Just one clarifying question. Does it have to happen during the monthly meetings, or is there flexibility on when the training happens? Okay.
Correct. It just says that we need to adequately train you.
Awesome. And then I saw a flurry of hands. I think it was Bill, Bernadette, and then Carolyn.
My question is just, what kind of training have you guys done in the past? I don't know that, so.
So we've gone to the mission to see how the police act with the homeless people. We have gone to the jail to see the camera situation, how they interact with jail staff, what the intake procedure is. We've gone and done, when we had some car accidents and chase scenes, we've gone and done EVOC, the car, how they drive the cars, how they make the cars spin. We've gone, I think, did we go to the range and see what the gun training was, or was that just a Saturday, other people?
That was just you.
Oh,
no, just kidding.
Okay.
That was that was Police Academy.
Oh, Police Academy. Okay. So we went to, we've also taken this on the road and gone to and done a case at Peterson Barn and at Sheldon High School instead of always doing it at the jail, or I mean at the library. Sorry. Well, we did actually have a meeting at the jail as well. After we had training at the jail, we had a meeting there.
We did.
We've had women's space. We've had, it's covered a broad array of police interactions. We've had we also have people come in, Blue Team, to talk about what the Blue Team was all about, how they come up with the case. Oh, it was the shooting. It was the simulator shooting at the police department that we did. It was an active shooter simulation training. I think we did property. We went through the evidence property and saw how, because we were having some cases with regards to complaints about evidence. So we went and saw how the evidence is put in and how it comes out. I'm sure there were lots more, but those are
resource officers, school resource officers, and we also had sexual assault, the agency involved in that.
So I think oftentimes the training that we get is anticipation of a case that's coming up down the road, or kind of something. I think it's like something that's hit the news, like the dogs, when the dogs were chasing people out of their houses. Then we had somebody come in and talk about the canine unit, and then a couple months later, we ended up having a case with regards to the canine. So the training isn't just to kind of just have some training. I mean, at least I've seen on my time on the board, it usually is related to something that's coming down the pike.
That is what we try to do. But, yeah.
I would say the other kind of interesting thing, Bill, is that obviously because we've all served different amounts of time and at different periods of time, we will all have received different trainings, because it's not like in January we train on this and in February we train on that. And so there is sort of this perpetual challenge of bringing everybody, or bringing training that's relevant to the people who are sitting now without being overly redundant for people who've already gone through certain training. So it's an interesting conundrum, since there's turnover on the board every year, I guess is the point. And I saw Carolyn.
Yeah, I wanted to add, in the 3 years I've been on it, we haven't had any field trips, and it seems like maybe back in Bernadette's first tenure, you were doing field trips quite often. We've had a lot more trainings kind of by organizations who are local, and then that helps us understand the resources that the officers have when they're encountering different situations, like the SAS, the sexual assault, and then we had a mental health expert from Portland come down and talk to us, and public records. We've had a lot of varied trainings that help inform just the board, and also inform how the officers interact. And we've had quite a few trainings from EPD members, like the SROs, like Rick was saying, and also we had a good training on how officers are trained. So I think that there are some that we should repeat every year, or every couple years, so we catch everyone, like how officers are trained, because that really does inform how we see the adjudications and how we see if anything's within reason or within policy. Kind of having a better understanding of how EPD works. I think that would be a good one to repeat more often than others. And then I also think it would be interesting if we did more kind of like within this 2-month time frame, every member of the board should do something, like do a ride along, or do watch a video that somebody prepares or something like that. Because one training we did actually watch a movie about homeless communities in another town, state. It was Under the Bridge, I think it was called. So that could have been something that you said, everybody should watch this, and then we'll discuss it briefly. So those are some ideas of how we could do trainings, not during a meeting.
Has there been a training on internal affairs and how internal affairs works? Because actually, from a lot of our what we do is look at the internal affairs of this.
I think when they went to the blue folder system is when we had a full training on how the complaints came into the auditor's office and then how they were done. But then the blue folder also is how the complaints originate by EPD to the auditor. And at that point, they kind of talked about how it goes through the internal affairs. I think Cindy was there, and I mean, Cindy's usually at our meetings and is pretty good about answering questions about how things progress through. I guess depending on what it means by how does IA work. Are we talking timelines? Are we talking about the actual, protocols that move it through? I think we've certainly done it. It's just in different kind of maybe disjointed.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we definitely had a talk when Blue Team got implemented, which is how uses of force and many other things are reported. But I think, I think that's a really good point. And it comes into sort of what I try to do in my one-on-ones with new members. But I think I do focus more on what's going on in the auditor's office. I think, Carolyn, to your point about doing a training on sort of this is how EPD is set up, this is what they do, we could definitely incorporate an IA track into that.
So it sounds like two things. So one thing that would be helpful, it sounds like there's some concrete ideas for specific kinds of trainings that we want to have, which is great. I think at some point we had like generated a list of the things that we wanted to be trained on. So I think it would be great if over this next month, if everybody submits to like emails to Leia, like what are things that you would like to be trained on, so that we have a list for all of us to look at together to apportion out how we want to do the trainings and which trainings we want to do. The other thing that I feel like I'm hearing is that we would like to spend, in terms of apportionment of meeting time, we would like to spend the bulk of our meetings doing case reviews and dedicating more time to that process, which would mean scheduling additional times outside of our monthly meetings to do the trainings. It doesn't make it doesn't make a lot of sense to me, I guess, to try to schedule those times now, but would everybody be comfortable at the September meeting of like looking at the list of trainings and coming up with a game plan for how we would like to approach doing those trainings outside of our monthly meeting time? Does that seem like a plan that would be workable? I see Mark.
In the past, Beatrice has sent out a survey to everyone about what they're interested in training topics. And so in one sense, she also has a list, and of course you can add things like that. So I think that's what we'll do, is just have Beatrice send out that to all the board members. And if you could respond in the next 2 or 3 weeks to talk about it, so we can talk about it in September, that would be helpful.
Go ahead, Bill.
It would be helpful too if maybe Carolyn and Bernadette could maybe on that list let us know, like, because Carolyn, you were mentioning that there's things you think should be done like every year, every 2 years. It'd be kind of nice for us to know that when we're looking at that list. And same thing, Bernadette, ones that you think were really important in the past.
Great. So for the September meeting, we'll revisit that, but dedicate the bulk of the September meeting then to case review and push the training to a later time. Okay. Is there any, I don't want to steamroller anybody. Are we okay moving ahead without a formal vote on that? Is that something people are comfortable with? Okay. So the next thing that we were going to look at is case selection and manner of case review. So again, Bernadette, you'll have more like institutional memory about this, but typically the chair and vice chair meet with the auditor staff and help to set the agendas. We are given in our information each month a list of like open, pending, and closed cases for us to look at with a brief description. And so typically if there's been things people have been interested in reviewing, sometimes they'll contact the chair or vice chair. I've been in meetings where people bring it up in the meeting, or multiple people in the meeting will say, hey, there's this case that looks like it's closed, and I would like to make sure that we review that publicly. So there's multiple kind of ways that information kind of percolates through. And I believe, yeah, so that's how we've done that in the past. And Bernadette, do you have anything to add to that?
I think where we put closing comments in, which I think are really good, I think that's where we historically always would kind of just ask, is there anything on the closed cases that anybody is interested in? Or the auditor's office would say, we've got some cases coming up, or sometimes it would be there's an open one on there, and then the auditor would say, well, yes, it's open and it's not as interesting as the initial blurb said. So I think we used to spend a little bit more time at the end of our meetings looking at things a little bit. And I don't know if that was a function of just how the meeting was run, or just people looked at the open and closed cases more and then brought it up. And it seems like this go round, it doesn't get discussed like it did the first go round. I think maybe also part of that is, it seems like in this past year, the cases that we have reviewed have been pretty important ones, and we haven't been choosing between, well, we could do this one, which is kind of interesting, or we could do this one, which is kind of interesting. It's like they've all been, this one really needs to be reviewed. And so it seems like that's what we've got going on right now, is cases that really need to be reviewed, rather than being able to kind of look and say, this looks like more interesting than this one because of whatever. I'm not sure if that makes sense, but.
Can I add or clarify maybe that when we're talking about interesting, my understanding of that is that when the auditor's office is going through a case, it's maybe something that's a little bit more ambiguous or unclear, and they really want the input from us about if they did it right. Like maybe usually it's when they suggest cases to us, there are cases that they weren't sure about, and it helps them kind of get clarity after the fact. And I think that's important, because I think we could look at every case that the auditor's office looks at, but some of them are just like cut and dry, right? So I think it's important that we look at the ones that are a little bit more problematic, or where there was more contention between the chief and the office and the internal process. That's my thought on that.
I think that's a lot of it now, Carolyn, but I think when I was doing this before, they were also going through the entire POM police procedures manual. And because they were reviewing that, we were trying to review cases where we knew that they were going to come up with policy, and that the police commission was going to be reviewing, for instance, the chase. What is that called when you chase them?
The pursuit policy.
The pursuit policy, yeah. So I think because they were going to be looking at the pursuit policy, we reviewed a case that had to do with pursuit. And so I guess what I'm saying, interesting from that perspective, is we were trying to tie our case reviews to have the citizen input into an actual case, because the police commission is looking at it from a policy perspective without a real life incident to inform them. And so we were kind of looking at real life incidents to inform our person that was going to the police commission, to then inform the police commission, to then engage the police chief. So that's what I was implying by interesting. I don't know that the police commission is reviewing as many policies right now that we would be able to impact.
If I may, when we discuss them in the past with the chair and vice chair, we try to recommend cases that there's some variety, for example. We try to recommend cases that we have a more difficult time making decisions on. Not something that's really easy, clear policy violation, because your input is very important to us. And we also try to bring forward cases where within the chain of command, because what happens is it starts with a sergeant, for example, making an adjudication recommendation. Then it goes to a lieutenant, and then it goes to a captain, and then it goes to the assistant chief, and it finally goes to the chief. So if there's some variety in those adjudication decisions, and somewhere along that line we might disagree with some of those decisions, historically those are the cases that we try to bring forward. I think probably maybe a couple of years ago, maybe three years ago, we did go through a lull where there just weren't that many allegations or cases to decide. And I would say now that we are the opposite of that. And so, but we try not to, I guess the metaphor is, lob softballs to you. And so we do give you, we try to give you cases that are difficult for us, because again, if it's a policy violation and it could affect an officer's career, it's important that we have that community member perspective. And I think that probably numerous cases that are sort of pending right now or have just been finished, we're in that same situation where perhaps members of the chain of command say that the officer acted within policy and we say they did not, or the other way around, less likely the other way around. So if you want to continue that pattern, we certainly have the opportunity to do that.
So in terms of the procedures for choosing the cases, in addition to what's already been said, I think we've also tried to bring forward cases that have a particular interest to the community. And because we can view the entire case and we can view all the footage and the rest of the community maybe can't, that it provides a layer of at least vicarious transparency for the community. So I know that's another kind of way that we've tried to hone in on which cases and when we're going to review them. In terms of the future, it sounds like maybe explicitly putting on the agenda like an item for, discussing future cases of interest might sort of cue us to bring those forward. And sometimes you may look through the cases and not have a particularly strong opinion, but that might be something we could do to sort of more systematically make sure we're making space to hear from everybody on the upcoming cases that we might want to review. Is that something, oh, Carolyn, go ahead.
I like that idea. And I would propose that we maybe put it with the opening comments rather than the closing comments, because I think lately, because of the library, I mean, with Zoom, it's different, but the library parking lot closes, so we have to be out by 8. And I feel like that our closing comments has been cut short. And maybe that's been different, Bernadette, since back in the day, or maybe our case discussion is going longer. But if we put it at the beginning, maybe that would give people the time to, if we want to say this is important to us, then we should put it in the beginning.
So I'll make a note of that for the September agenda. Are there any other things that people would like to see happen in terms of our process on case selection? So seeing that. The other item that is mixed in with this agenda item was just the process that we use to review the cases. So last month we tried something new, and personally I liked it. I thought that it was nice to have a more free-flowing conversation at the beginning, and it also allows people who are listening who don't have the benefit of having seen the entire file that we have of getting a little bit more of a narrative, a description of how people sort of interacted with that file, what they saw, and then because we are obligated to make sure we cover certain things each time. We consolidated that into like 3 groups and made sure that we're still following the requirements that we have in terms of looking at the intake and looking at, commenting on the adjudication, but that was consolidated. So for me, that worked a little bit better than what we've done in the past. Are there any other changes or suggestions or differing opinions on that for our next meetings?
I agree. It felt much more organic.
I agree. I thought that the last meeting went very well.
I think it's, changing the process. I think it's more like the first time I was on where it was much more conversational, which is why we didn't have the pressure at the end, Carolyn, to like get out of the library, because I think it was more free flowing. And so I think the more free flowing it actually goes quicker and more it gets said, which seems kind of like it should have taken, we'd talk longer because it's free flowing, but I think it works better. And I agree. I think because Jose said, he didn't have the file and wasn't able to, know what we were talking about, but because of the way we talked about it, it made sense to him. So that kind of made me feel like, okay, if it's making sense to somebody who hasn't looked at the file, who, is engaged with us, then it makes me feel like we're on a better track to being informing the public.
So it sounds like that's working. So let's try to, we'll bring that forward. So you'll get the same style of worksheet that you can go through if that's helpful to you to sort your thoughts. I like a good worksheet to help me sort my thoughts, my very scattered thoughts. So we'll try to keep that going. But I mean, the group may evolve and change, and it doesn't need to be a big drawn out process. I think if we need to change things, we should keep tweaking it and working on it until it's working for everybody. But I'm thankful for the change, and thankful to Michael for the suggestion on like how to make the meetings more organic. So I think it worked pretty good, and let's keep doing what we're doing. And if we need to modify, please don't be shy about speaking up. So I'm going to move us right along. Election timing is the next item on the agenda. When I went through and read the rules and procedures, super fun reading, it looked like we need to appoint our officers and our liaisons. It said no later than the October meeting. If I'm remembering correctly, we used to do it maybe in the September meeting, but then pushed it to October because we were trying to give new members a little time to get settled, to understand a little more about kind of the different options before voting. And so it's been sitting at October. Does anybody have recommendations for changing that timing or suggestions for how they would like that to be the same or different?
I just have a question with regards to, because the appointment to the police commission has to get approved by the mayor's office, does that influence our timing at all?
It has to be approved by city council. So typically when you guys, what we do typically is do the chair and vice chair, and then the representative to the police commission, which is forwarded to city council for final approval, and then amongst yourselves, you pick the liaison to the Human Rights Commission. I don't recollect a mandatory day for the Police Commission for October, but it's been the most convenient to do all three or all four at the same time. But it's council that approves it. We make it's called an AIS, which I forget what the acronym stands for, that we submit to City Council so that they can vote on your recommendation for the Police Commission.
Well, I can appreciate doing them all at the same time. There's a part of me that thinks it's too soon to put new people on the Police Commission or the Human Rights Commission at their first or second meeting. But voting on the chair, because we need to do that by council timing in October, I'm wondering if we don't just split it and put the appointments to other boards and commissions into, say, January. That way it gives people an option to kind of understand what's going on. And so if the new members, really have, the idea that they want to do that, they can understand what our process is before they then go and liaison to somebody else. Otherwise, it always seems to fall to the people that have been on the board and are kind of already on there. And I think it gives a chance for newer people to kind of engage in more fully on the board and in other commissions. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's just what I'm
That was
thinking.
pretty persuasive to me.
And actually the Human Rights Commission has gone to that same thing, Bernadette. They've done that exact thing for the same reasons, where they've pushed their election to the liaison positions to the January meeting so that people have, like half a year basically having served before that process happens. So I think that's very sensible and has good precedent with other boards and commissions as well.
I'm a little, because we have 3-year terms, so that would mean pretty much we would only be electing people on their first or second year. Because obviously someone elected in their 3rd year in January wouldn't be able, then we'd be without a liaison for half the year. So I'm wondering if maybe it's too late because for that reason, since we're then limiting the number of people who are eligible in theory.
That's an interesting point. That would be the disadvantage of pushing it off to January. You're right. That would cause a potential conflict. I mean, I suppose either way, if someone was in their final term, we would be without a liaison either way from the July meeting until the October meeting, right? Regardless of when am I understanding that correctly? I see Bill's hand.
So I guess I like Bernadette's suggestion, and Michael, I think what is sort of what Bernadette is kind of getting to is maybe a lot of people don't want to, wouldn't look to be that liaison if they knew they might not stay on the board for that next year for the second term or something, or wouldn't be that. So I think I kind of like the idea of wait until January.
I guess it just seems odd since, as far as I know, the only person to volunteer to be in a liaison in their first year was me last year. And we instead chose Lindsey, who was already chair, so she had 2 positions. And we decided not to take the opportunity to have someone in their first year who was willing to participate in that way serve. So I'm not sure why. I'm a little confused.
But you can go 3-3-year terms. That's the maximum. There's no specific deadline for the Police Commission that I'm finding in any of the materials. And again, I think the October thing was probably, I don't think it's in the ordinance. I got a stack of papers here, though I'm not positive about that. So I think you can choose at any point in time. You just have to make we have to do the ARS to the City Council to get the formal approval. And I wasn't here when they decided all that. So, in any case, so yeah, if it's like your first term and you want to serve a second term, then you know it can overlap.
You don't have to apply for a second term?
You have to apply for a second term. Historically, not always, but historically, council, it's likely that incumbents, if they wish to reapply for boards and commissions, do get that opportunity to be selected again.
That is a good point. A reminder that if you want to serve additional terms, you do have to reapply. Otherwise, you will naturally drop out of the board. And I think sometimes that's been surprising to people. So that's a good point of order. Does anybody want to float a motion about changing the timing of the elections from October to January?
Did we vote in October this year? No, we just voted.
Last year we voted in October, and the year before that we voted in October.
And yeah, I'll make a motion that we vote on the chair and vice chair in our October meeting, and that we vote on HRC and police commission representatives in our January meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Michael? The motion carries. So that would be the chair and vice chair in October and the HRC and police commission liaison in the January meeting. Okay, let me move on. Okay, so item number 8, it looks like, is the recording of meetings. So we're in a unique period of time when it is mandated that the meetings be recorded. So we are happily complying with the rules and recording the meetings. This has been sort of a perennial issue, and I didn't feel like in our last meeting we really had time to dive into it or discuss it. In some ways, at this moment is sort of a moot point. So I don't know about, I honestly feel like conflicted about, I don't know how to facilitate this conversation well. But I thought since this is a process-oriented meeting, it's a good time to bring it up and talk about any concerns that people have about the recording of the meetings. So I see you, Bill. So I'll just throw in my 2 cents and then I'll mute myself. But so for me, I don't have a strong aversion to the recording of the meetings. I think it's helpful. I do want to say though, however, I use the minutes a lot, and it's very helpful for me to have that sort of meaty summary minutes that we have. It's helpful for me to be able to go back and look at things. So I would say in general, I don't have any big issues with recording of meetings, but that I would want to also voice strong support for very nice, thick meeting minutes to also accompany our public record. And go ahead, Bill. Sorry, Bill, I see your hand. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, no, my system's locking up. Could I just, maybe Leah or Mark, could you guys tell us why? Because weren't they recorded in the beginning and then it stopped? So maybe give us a little history, or they were never recorded.
I don't remember. I think when I first got here, I think we just had minute recorders, and then our minute recorder started recording, so that made it a public record anyway. So beyond that, I think it's just been the choice of each individual board about whether they wanted to do that. The default of something live like this, of course, is mentioning an officer's name, which is prohibited. And then if there's a recording, going through that and finding that. But I think, again, I think everyone is disciplined as they are now. I don't think it was an issue. And but it's entirely up to the board. I'm not sure of any historical reference other than ensuring that names aren't used during the proceedings. I think Leah has something too. No?
I mean, that's all I remember also.
I didn't catch that from Leah. Did anyone else catch that, or was that garbled for everybody?
Garbled.
And she's frozen, it looks like.
She looks so perfect.
Sorry, my
There she goes.
just said I
Leah-
have nothing to add.
Oh,
Nothing.
you don't have anything? Okay.
Nothing. Move on.
Thank you.
Oh.
Does anybody else, is there anything else that we want to say about meeting recordings? I guess, I mean, the only other comment I would add is that, oh, go ahead, Carolyn, I see your hand.
I see value in it. I feel like if we're expecting officers to be transparent and have their body worn cameras available to us, it seems fair that we would provide our recorded meetings to the public. I think that having public involvement in our meetings can only help the purpose that I think we all agree are here for. So that's my 2 cents. I think I would prefer maybe an audio to a video generally, but to have the audio permanently or, public's record.
I will say that, with Zoom, I think the video and audio recordings are actually useful. Like I can go back and watch them. One thing that can sometimes be a challenge with video recordings, like I know historically, sometimes I've gone back to old police commission meetings that are recorded with a video camera, and sometimes the audio quality is so poor that it's difficult to actually utilize it as a record. So with Zoom, it's pretty straightforward and the quality is fine, and we don't have that same challenge as when we're actually physically co-located. So that's one kind of thing. Straight audio recordings, I agree, Carolyn, sometimes have been higher quality and maybe more usable, depending on the context. And that's not unprecedented. There are other boards and commissions who do audio recording plus minutes as their record.
I would also echo, I think you said this already, that I don't want to get rid of our recorded minutes. I think that that's a more helpful document in a lot of ways than audio or recording. But so I'd want to have them in tandem.
Any other thoughts out there about recording? Bernadette, go ahead.
It seems like at one point they said you either get recordings or you get minutes. And so is that the choice that we're at?
I think at some point you might be right, but we're unique in that I have total control over my budget, and so I don't. That's not going to be a hurdle. Let me put it that way. It's not going to be a hurdle. If you want to do them in tandem, then that's not a problem.
I was going to say they did do both at the police commission. They videoed and they gave us minutes for those meetings.
Wasn't there a financial breakdown last time we had this discussion, Mark, with regards to what the cost was?
The minutes are the most expensive. So I'm taking a guess here, probably between $1,600 and $2,200 a year, maybe. And Vicki can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's usually about the breakdown. I'm thinking it's about between $400 and $500 a quarter, but I might be mistaken. But I think that's ballpark where we're at.
I think if the police commission has both minutes and video recordings, it seems that there's not a lot of reason not to be on par, given the importance of what we do and the importance of transparency to our mission.
I agree. I think when we first had the discussion 9 years ago, I think there was still the concern that names were being mentioned pretty often during the course of the reviews. And so there was that balance between transparency, but also the requirement that it's a personnel matter and that the officer's names not be mentioned. And so I think that was a lot of why I think the leaning was against the recording of the minutes, and the idea that at that time we were put that it was a choice. It was like we either got the beefy minutes or we had a recording, and the only thing that would be in the minutes would be the motions. And so there was a real concern that if people really wanted to kind of dive into what we were doing, they either had to listen to the whole thing as opposed to reading our minutes, which are pretty good about really telling everybody what's going on, but having the ability for the minutes recorder to not put the names in there if they were accidentally mentioned in the course of the meeting. So that's how I recall 9 years ago, we came to the decision to not record minutes or meetings. That was the biggest part, was the officers' names being mentioned.
To that point, I'd also recommend, if we do record, that we get a lot better, all of us, at avoiding gendered pronouns, because that would be a permanent record of that for the same reason. I think we are better at the names. I don't think in my 3 years names have really come up, but the gender definitely does.
Staff has also changed the way that they give us the files. So when you read through the first part of your binder, it's rather than having the names, it says Officer A, Officer B, Officer C. So when I'm reading through it, I can go back and look and see who the officers were, but I'm reading the case at first with the officers' names redacted, which I do think helps get us in that habit, because then all of us are, kind of on the same page in terms of, okay, this is Officer B or this is Lieutenant X or whatever. So I do think that minor modification has helped us to refrain from accidentally saying officers' names. And I totally agree with you about the rededicating ourselves to gender neutral pronouns for the same reasons. Is there any other comments on this? So like I said, we're in this odd moment where we will be recording because it's mandated. Does anybody want to make a motion that after that period ends, which is a little bit ambiguous on exactly when that will be, that we move forward with recording of meetings in addition to minutes?
I so move. I move that we record after this.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Go ahead, Leah.
I have a point of clarification. Hopefully you guys can hear me. Do you mean video recording or audio recording?
Good question. Carolyn?
I would say whatever is available and accessible and works well. So whatever, I don't know that I have a preference necessarily. I'd rather just have it work well.
I make a friendly amendment that we do it as an audio recording only, because I think there would be the ability, if a name is mentioned or a gender is mentioned, it would be easier to change on an audio recording than on a video recording. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I'm old school. Somebody younger than me, I'm sure, would know way better.
It can be done with either. You could just separate the audio track from the video track on the program. I would recommend the video just because with an audio recording, then there's a need to go back and specify who's speaking. And you know, we could do that as we you know, if anyone's ever been on a conference call, like, and everyone's on the conference call and everyone has to say, this is Mike, and right. It would be easier to not have to do that if we are video recording. But I agree, we should get what works best. So if video is not compatible with adequate audio, then
I will withdraw my friendly amendment request then, if that's the way you're supposed to do it.
We can do it however we want. So Carolyn, then your motion stands to record the meetings in addition to minutes, and Rick seconded. All in favor? Aye, or raise your hand. Anybody opposed? Okay, so the motion carries. So after this mandate to record the Zoom meetings expires, we will continue to record our meetings in addition to the minutes that we provide for the public record after that. Thank you for that. So the next item, I should ask, like, does anybody need to take just like a minute to like take a break? I realize now looking at this agenda, I did not plan that in, and Zoom meetings are kind of a special kind of brutal. Does anybody want to take like a 3 to 5 minute pause to gather themselves and then come back? Yeah, okay. So I see it's 7:02. Let's come back at 7:07 and see you in a minute. So Bill, how's the weather in Sun River?
It is really warm here, and it was in the 80s most days. And then we had these 2 weird thunderstorms come through over the weekend that had huge winds. Easy.
That's wild. We lived in Central Oregon for a while, and I actually like really loved the weather, except for like about 3 weeks in August, and it was a little bit. It's very dry. It's very dry, I guess, which is nice, but it's hot.
But it's still
We're
nice.
still recording?
Yeah,
We're
I
still
think
on the
so.
recording. Oh, I thought she put it on pause. So just letting everybody know.
Thanks.
I forgot. Hi, everyone.
Hi. Thanks
She's
for agreeing to take a little break. I was super thirsty. My office is also a touch warm. But it does have a door that closes now, which is awesome. Okay. We're back. Okay. That's all of us, right? Yeah. Except for Mark, maybe. Oh, there you are. Sorry, you're right in the middle of my screen. You're right under me. It's like Hollywood Squares. Okay, so the next item on our agenda, thank you for agreeing to take a little break. That's helpful for me. The next item on the agenda is number 9. So corrective action, access to information and access to process. So this is a big, huge topic. I don't know that we're going to resolve anything in this meeting, but I thought it's good to start the conversation and publicly start the conversation to try to maybe chart a path forward. So what I meant by corrective action is just, I brought up briefly in our last meeting the issue of the lack of transparency in the disciplinary process. So that's a critique that I have heard from community, and it's something that I sort of have struggled with myself. It can be really difficult to look at the cases and to see the good process that we go through, and to see the level of detail that goes into the investigations and get to the adjudication recommendations, and to see everybody agrees that maybe, let's say, an allegation be sustained, but then to have this complete black hole that follows that, like there's no transparency on then what happens next. I remember, Rick, you making an important comment about you didn't use the word privacy, but sort of like considering the individual officers and considering that might the process of increasing transparency might be feel very personal or invasive. I'm kind of butchering what you said, but I do remember there was some conversation surfacing concerns with more transparency in the disciplinary process that follows an investigation and an adjudication. So I do remember there's definitely not like consensus about what that means or what that should look like, but I wanted to sort of surface it and see what other people thought, if you've had similar experiences, if there's other perspectives that you have about how we might want, any recommendations we might want to make. So obviously any recommendations we do make on this topic are going to run into a whole series of constraining factors that are beyond our table. But I think until we start to talk about them and move them forward, then we don't really know what process we might want to take if we should decide to advocate for any changes. So I thought I would just generally open it up to conversation about transparency when it comes to corrective action of cases that we've reviewed, whether that be with the auditor's office or with this board specifically. And I didn't think we had quite enough time to talk about it in the last meeting. So I see Rick, go ahead.
Yes, I think that there are a number of levels that we need to look at it. The first is probably the statutory privilege or statutory governance of the relationship between public employees and their hiring parties. The second is probably the collective bargaining agreement. And I'm not sure what that says. I frankly have never seen it. But I'm guessing that there's something in there about whether or not those types of things are made public. The third is the empowering document, whether our ordinance allows for that or whether it would need to be changed. And I'm not aware of any bylaw problem with it, but it seems to me that there are several levels that we need to address. We can probably state our policy position on it, but I think we're stuck with whatever result that needs to be done by the legislature, the city council, or the bargaining unit agreement.
Rick has hit the nail on the head with all three. Ding, ding, ding. I will happily send you all the collective bargaining agreement. I believe it's actually on the police department's website, but I can send that to you if you're, needing some help sleeping.
Didn't you send it to us before?
I may have sent it. I feel like I sent it to one of the
I
subcommittees.
think you sent it to me.
So
It's actually, if I may, it's
sending
actually on the human resources portion of the city's website. The current contract, the protocols are either are within the auditor's office thing on the right-hand side with like all the other documents like the pay org thing and things like that. So the contract is, there's just a few pages on discipline. And the protocols is is 8 pages. So I'm kind of looking for it right now. And then the ordinance, it is an ordinance that the Civilian Review Board or its individual members may not review employee discipline decisions except in the context of reviewing trend reports from the auditor's office as consistent with section further north. So that's the long and short of it. That's where they exist. And then I know that we had a decision in which our office could interview employees because we're an arm of the city, if you will. And I'm not sure if then that extends over to whether you would have the ability to review disciplinary decisions or not. I would guess that would be eventually in the hands of the State Labor Relations Board like us interviewing people. So I think that's the different paths that are out there.
So Bill, I see your hand.
So I guess, my question to the group, and I mean, I understand why people at times want to see those, what happens, but is that really something that we need to do our job on this board where we're reviewing really the investigation to making sure that that's done properly and that, whether we agree with the outcomes of that investigation and why? I'm not sure that we as this board need to know what then ultimately happens to that person, because really our job is to make sure that we are investigating all of these complaints thoroughly and transparently.
So I suppose my initial response would be that is the job that we've been tasked with, the specific way that we do our job now. And I think that broader community transparency, particularly in the context of a state like Oregon, which has such very strict public records restrictions that prohibit a great deal of transparency to the general public, that providing the level of transparency of discipline, and I think that can take a number of forms, I'll just be clear, and I'll elaborate on that in a minute, is something that fits within our sort of general role, which is to provide transparency and improve confidence in the public in the civilian oversight process. And one thing that I have heard community members complain about is, great, okay, we went through this process, it was sustained, but then what happens? Like, is it sustained and the officer continues to work for the department? We all know just from seeing cases with certain officers again and again and again and again that that is often the case, for example, which erodes trust in a public oversight system, making it feel essentially toothless, right? The other thing that I would say is, I think that there are many ways that we could get to a more transparent place than we are now. And it wouldn't necessarily have to take the form of, okay, now we've reviewed this case with Officer A, we see that the allegations were sustained, and now we see what the discipline is. That is a process, a method. But there could also be tools like a disciplinary matrix that would just give guidelines, like, so that you would be able to see, you know, when these types of allegations are sustained, these types of discipline are appropriate, and to know, and that then we as the public would know that there were non-arbitrary guidelines that were sort of guiding that path, and in a more transparent way than it is going on now, which seems to be not necessarily consistent, like from case to case, right? So if someone, there have been there may be an officer, for example, and because I don't have vision into this process is part of the reason I'm asking these questions. I'm not saying I know this to be the case. I'm saying hypothetically, you know, if there were two officers who are found have sustained allegations of a similar type, do they get a similar kind of discipline? Like we have no idea, right? And so something like a disciplinary matrix would be another way to get to a higher level of transparency that wouldn't necessarily be directly linked to a specific officer. But there's lots of different ways that I think we could improve transparency.
Well,
but I think that there is a lack of transparency now.
Well, I disagree with you, Lindsay. I think there is a matrix, and Human Resources has offered the police commission that matrix. But I don't think it's our job to determine if they still should be working at the department or they shouldn't be. And I don't think we should bring that up. This is not part of this board. This is really a board that looks and makes sure that complaints are being fully investigated and done that way. I mean, we can't follow through. And how do I know, or how do you know if that discipline is appropriate or not?
Oh, I totally hear what you're saying in that regard. I'm not saying I think this board should adjudicate discipline. What I am saying is I think that the disciplinary process should be visible to the board, which feels like a very different thing than the board. And that's my opinion, and we can disagree. But I think the public and us not having any transparency into what happens when allegations are sustained erodes trust in the process.
If I could add, just I found the article in the contract. This Article 36.6 states that the city auditor shall not review any file nor make any suggestions regarding potential employee discipline until all appeals of such discipline have occurred. The city shall provide a copy of all auditor reports to the association. So is this city auditor you, or is this a different city auditor?
No, it's for us. And I don't know what's in the newest contract, and correct me if I'm wrong, Leia, and the lawyers, they can't put something in a contract that overrides, for example, an ordinance. So if the ordinance says that the Civilian Review Board can't review disciplinary records other than in the general context, even if they have that in the contract, and it wasn't grandfathered prior to the ordinance, it can't override the ordinance. And then I also want to add, and I don't know if this is the right insertion point or not, the state legislature just passed a law in which the Department of Public Safety and Training, DPSST is the acronym, I'm not good with acronyms tonight, publishes the records of all officers whose certification has been taken away. And I think it goes back at least 20 years. There's former EPD officers on there. The legislature is considering publishing all findings of excessive force against officers. That's under consideration with the state legislature. And then there is also consideration of having all excessive force complaints investigated by BOLI, which is Bureau of Labor. oh, help me, I can't forget the
Bureau of Labor and Industry.
Yeah, of industry. So then, which would really shift the paradigm. But I think there's a decent chance that the one involving anytime there's excessive force of it being published. I'm a little worried about the whole bully thing, but again, I'm not really involved in that. So there has been progress made at the state level, but still they can't write something. I think there's a few other items in their contract that try to override the ordinance, but they can't override the ordinance.
So Jose, I see you, and then Leah, I see you.
I guess I just wanted to offer up some food for thought that, you know, when we think about other assessment practices in civic institutions, say sentencing guidelines, or, you know, the way that like students get you know, assessed at like a university. These aren't, I'm not saying these are directly equivalent things, but when we talk about assessment practices, they're all kind of different iterations of the same thing. And that, you know, to make any kind of process objective, you want to have those kind of criteria out in the front, because you never want to be accused of, say, moving the goalposts, especially when the goalposts are not visible. That's all I have to offer.
Leah, I saw your hand. And Rick, did I see your hand, or were you just, okay, just making sure.
Yeah. So the ordinance also echoes this issue. It says in the police auditor ordinance that we can develop adjudication recommendations, but all employee discipline decisions are made by the chief of police. And we are not authorized to recommend level of discipline for police employees. So part of it is because we don't do that work. You guys don't oversee it, part of it. But also there are the other specific instances about CRB not looking at discipline. I will say, Michael, that part in the contract, given our working relationship and how often we are communicating with EPD, in general, we know what's been recommended and if it's getting grieved and where in the process those things are. We, again, don't have input. That's not, we don't officially have input. No, we don't have input. I mean, Mark and I sometimes just give opinions because we're opinionated people, but it's not an avenue for us. And as far as a matrix, Human Resources works with Chain of Command to develop recommendations for the chief on discipline. But to my understanding, there is no matrix. There is a system for city employees overall. When you have instances of misconduct as a city employee, and so HR works with EPD to tailor those recommendations based on employee history, if they have another sustained thing within 18 months, if they're on a performance plan, like all those things that HR knows that we don't know. We've definitely talked a lot about those disciplinary matrices in the past, specific for EPD employees, and they just have not caught traction. But I do think that, I mean, yeah, that's all I got, I think. I'm gonna stop there.
Mark, I see your hand.
And there is, and again, Bill, the Human Resources did give you that presentation. So there's various types of discipline, which I think, if I can help you understand, there's coaching and then documented counseling is the highest step of discipline that officers cannot grieve. If they have a documented counseling, then there's another violation, then they can move to the oral reprimand, which the union can grieve. Then they go to the written reprimand, and then they go to any length of suspension. And Bernadette and I had this conversation. And then there's termination. So that trigger point exists between the documented counseling and the or a reprimand. So if you look at our annual reports over the years, what you see is the mode, the most common discipline is the documented counseling, because it's not grievable and it doesn't set a trigger point. So certainly there can be concern about, sort of making that, where that divide exists, if you will. But the perspective I get from, of course, the officers is once they've reached that trigger point, then that causes a significant amount of angst, because it does start that process that Bill was talking about, that HR probably presented to the police commission at some point in time. So, and I even had that conversation with Bernadette. It's like, even if you get a 2-day suspension, then within that 5-year period, if you have another major event, the only other option is termination. There's not like a 2-day suspension and then a 60-day suspension. So it's certainly not the way that I would have structured it. And then to Lindsey's point, again, coming from Ohio, which has very broad public records, you would know all that. I think people want to know, they want to know a name and a number. They want to know who it was, and they want to know what the penalty was. And anything short of that, very few people really bear witness in the community to those kinds of things. And I think that that's unsettling for a lot of people. Over.
So I don't think there's like a clear like decision point or anything here. I do think this has been helpful to have more of a conversation about this as a board. I think it's potentially an issue that will continue to arise as we go through these public processes and talking about, in increasing or changing or improving transparency when it comes to law enforcement. Yeah. So is there anything else that anyone wants to say on this before we move on to our next agenda item? Mark, I see your hand.
Just, I think one final point so we're part of the legislative branch. And historically in governments, the executive branch is responsible for human resources matters. And I think it makes us unique in that it allows us to probe in a different way, and we're not under the control of the city manager, but it has that weakness where we don't have those executive powers that historically exist perhaps in other places. I've been under that system. I've been in a system where we recommended discipline. And again, it would all be a public record anyway. So they both have their advantages and disadvantages in my view. I won't go into them, but I've been in both systems. I do like the fact that we are part of the legislative branch rather than the executive branch, and I advocate for that anytime anyone sets up oversight, but it does have its limitations.
Thanks, Mark. So looks like we're at action item number 10. So if I'm remembering correctly, at the time of our last meeting, the task force hadn't been formalized. At this point, I think Leah has circulated to everybody the email with the invitation from Councilwoman Ye and Councilor Evans inviting the CRB to send 2 members to the joint task force that's going to be looking at the Campaign Zero platform, evaluating City of Eugene policies and making recommendations. I'm going to forget some of the details, so forgive me, but it looks like it's the CRB has a couple of seats, the Police Commission, the Human Rights Commission. There are an assortment of community agencies, and then the mayor has a few seats which she will appoint directly, 4 seats that she will appoint directly. And it will be staffed, and City Council requested that we send the names of the 2 people who will serve by no later than September 1st. So this meeting worked out well I know Police Commission is going to be holding an August meeting, which it typically doesn't, I think the 27th of August, to do this, go through the same process to put forward their 2 members, which they wanted to do after the appointment of the new Police Commission members, since that process was a little bit delayed. So I think Leah has the list of people who nominated themselves to be considered for the position, but I just wanted to make sure, like, while we're all here, so I think, Leah, could you read who has submitted, and then if anybody else wanted to be considered but isn't on that list, please just say so now. It's not like we're not trying to disqualify you. I just want to make sure that the list is correct before we move into discussion and voting.
Yeah, I am happy to do that. Mark, I saw you raising your hand. Do you want to do that? Do you want to jump in?
I just wondered if you had also let them know the specifics, that it's a paid position. They hope to have the work done by January, which I think is optimistic. So it's $15 an hour, which I think was something that Lindsey advocated quite a while ago, in hopes of getting more diversity in people who might have childcare costs or transportation costs that they might not otherwise can afford. So I didn't know if you had been that detailed in your information, but it also includes a compensation rate of $15 an hour.
Thank you so much, Mark. And that's a really good point. Like, we should celebrate that with like balloons or something. That's been something that's been on the list for years, even into the past mayor's term. So yes, that's, I'm excited that they've decided to dedicate the resource to making it a more accessible task force.
My internet's having problems.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. I'm going to try for this, but if it gets too painful, I'm just going to run a poll.
Okay.
Because basically, and start waving or something if, I don't know.
The virtual background that you have might be part of the problem.
You, but so basically, Rick. Oh, I can't let that go. You're gonna see, it's gonna be so boring, you guys. My fake house is so much better. Okay, we'll try this because of Michael. We'll try this. So we've got Rick, Lindsey, Michael, Bernadette all volunteered, and Bill also volunteered. But he also mentioned that he wanted to just make sure that we had at least 2. So, so we have 5 people who have expressed interest.
Oh, and just, if you don't mind, just clarifying that, is that I'd rather have somebody that's been on the commission.
And I did a little poll. Oh,
sorry, Leah.
no, that's okay.
Do you want to call me and then?
Best here.
Do you
okay.
want to call me?
So Bill, do you want?
Do you want to call me and speak into my phone, and then I can transmit from my phone to you, to them verbally?
Sure.
Just turn off your camera. Sometimes that works.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah.
That always works for me.
Leia Pitcher. Leia Pitcher.
It's very meta.
It's
Is she on speaker?
I can't hear her.
okay, go ahead now.
Okay, so we have 5 speakers who have, 5 members who have expressed interest. I can hear my voice in my ears, so I'm going to pause every so often just to get through. But I have a poll, so I'm going to put out a poll on your screens, and I want you to each vote for 2 people.
Can you pause for just a second, Leah? Mark, can you transmit that? I wanted to make sure, Jose or Carolyn, did you want to be considered in this voting process?
I have faith that the people who put themselves forward can do a great job, but I would like to maybe hear maybe just like a snippet from the people who, I don't know, like an elevator speech kind of thing. Like, why do you want to do this? Is that fair to ask or not? I don't know.
So maybe yes. And Bill, I see your hand and then we can go back to that.
I just want to say I'd rather have somebody that's been on the civilian review board be on this, not me. I just told Leah that if we ended up not having two because of the time commitment, that I'm the other four.
So Bill, would you like your name to be removed from the list, or would you like to stay on the list?
You can remove me from the list.
Okay. Sorry to be so blunt. I'm a little slow sometimes on the uptake of those things. Okay.
And do we have more information other than it was meet 10 to 12 times between now and January, or September and January is what I understood from the email? I mean, we don't know if it's daytime, evening, anything more than that at this point, right?
That's correct. It's pretty, yeah, the information so far is pretty basic.
But I'm assuming that because of the pandemic, that Zoom is the most likely option for these meetings so that they can be attended remotely. Is that accurate to the best of your knowledge?
I think so, yeah, because the city still is prohibited meetings, so.
Do you know
Just
if they'll
checking,
be
wasn't
public
sure if that had
meetings?
changed.
Sorry, do you know if they'll be public?
Yes, I believe so. Yeah, I think they have to be, yeah. I think they have to pick a chair. I don't know how easy it is for 30 people to pick a chair, so. So Leah, do you have then who's left for the list so you can start your, so, and I think Carolyn wants to hear a 1 or 2 minute speech from each person about why they want to serve on the committee.
I don't need to hear that. If people think that's a reasonable option, that's fine. I'm not.
Sorry, need was the wrong word.
I'm not that precious.
Yeah.
I mean, we
love
can
all
do.
of you jumping in on this.
We can do that. Does anybody want to volunteer to go first?
Sure. I know a lot. I'm also, I think, someone who I know that with this, I think that with this task force, there is an interest
Okay,
in
you're back. I'm going to put you on speaker.
looking at the way that things work and asking critical questions about them. And I think that I am someone who came onto this particular board and things had run a particular way for quite a while, and a lot of the same people on the board. And I pressed about process, I pressed about recording, and I pressed about being allowed to have more space to comment freely on the cases. And I think that people seem to have liked those changes. And I would like to think that that's partly the result of bringing someone new in with a different perspective on the process. I'm going to be on the American Association of University Professors National Task Force this fall on campus policing, and we'll have our report recommending position for the AAUP on campus policing. We'll have that done in November, so I'll be freed up a little bit toward the end of this particular task force's work.
Leah, who else expressed interest?
So I think Bernadette and Rick are the other two, and myself. So I'll go next, and then Bernadette, do you want to go next? And Rick, you can go last. Is that okay? Is that just, it's a little arbitrary. So I would just say I would look forward to participating on the task force to see across, I think there are opportunities to make policy changes because of the moment we're in and across the organization. I think there are things, for example, outside strictly of CRB and Police Commission that might be worth considering. And so I think having the perspective of working internally with the city as an organization from a human rights perspective and doing a lot of hate and bias work with the community in addition to serving on these two boards, is useful background. And I'd also say that I think I'm very thankful for the competency and caliber of people on this board. So I think there aren't any wrong choices. Bernadette and then Rick.
I would wholeheartedly agree with that last statement, Lindsay. I think any of the four of us are going to go in there. I think we're going to bring different perspectives from each other, but also from other boards and commissions that are going to be represented there. I think the one thing I didn't see listed on the board are the people that are going to be represented. I think there was one youth group kind of mentioned in there. And so when I was still working in the DA's office, I was in the juvenile department. So working in the juvenile department, now working in schools, working with school resource officers, working with different agencies, I think it's sometimes helpful. And to see the growth of police since I came to Eugene in 1993, 91, and through, the process of implementing the CRB and, the different chiefs, I think as it has evolved, I think it's a good perspective. And I think going forward, I think we're going to see that Eugene's EPD in particular is willing to evolve. And I think having a task force like this is great to be able to inform them where we want them to go next, to they've moved forward a lot, and to keep moving forward and give them some direction with that in this time, I think is a great thing.
And Rick, you're up. You're muted. I can't hear you.
Okay, there I go. I think that what Bernadette just said is totally accurate. I think that the department is willing to evolve. And I think that they just need some guidance. I think Chief Skinner has got the right attitude that he will do what the citizens want him to do in terms of guiding his force and in a manner that makes it effective and fair. And so, I really don't have much to add to that. I've got a lot of experience, and I'm certainly willing to put it to use.
Thanks, everyone. So, Leah, can you put the poll
Yes, you guys.
out? Thank you.
I figured it out.
Thank you.
Mike. Oh, no, I didn't. No, I didn't.
Yes, I'll put out the poll.
Thank you. And for me, will it pop up in my screen, or will I need to click something at the bottom of the screen? Oh, it popped up. Okay, never mind. So I think we're asking everybody to vote for 2 members to be appointed. This will be anonymous, and then we'll see what the results are, and then we'll report out these results to council probably tomorrow, so that they have that in time for that September deadline. Okay.
So guys, I'm seeing 16 votes, and there should be only 14. I didn't vote. Mark, did you vote?
Oh, I see something in the, I see.
Marina Markstrom voted.
Oh, okay. So no worries. Okay, so okay, now we know. It pops up to the participants as well. Okay, so can all participants in the audience refrain from voting? The CRB members will vote. We'll just do this again. Can you activate the poll again, Leah? Sorry. Thank you.
I'm sorry, guys. Okay, I have 7 people voting. Good job, guys.
Close the polls.
I have closed polling. Rick
Can
and
you do
Bernadette
this by
will be
mail?
Yeah.
Say that
Rick
again.
and Bernadette will be serving.
I missed that. Can somebody say that again?
I think I
She
heard
said
that.
Rick and Bernadette. She keeps cutting out. We need to really talk to the providers in Deschutes County to try to.
I am in Eugene.
Oh, I thought you were.
She's in South Eugene.
I promise. No, my kids were watching a movie. I thought that fixed it. It didn't. Bernadette and Rick, thank you.
Great. So thank you for voting, everyone. So we will send Rick and Bernadette's names to City Council, and then you'll be meeting a lot. And I guess the good news is in between, we are going to have quite a few meetings as well. So I look forward to hearing back from you how that process is evolving. The last item it looks like on here before closing comments is an auditor's report. So Mark, do you, or Leah, I shouldn't assume, how you've divided your duties. Would you like to give us an update?
I don't want to spend too much time other than we haven't got the use of force book back from the shooting of Mr. Rodriguez, but I've been starting to write. Again, we continue to have a number of cases. I think probably, as I sit here and think about it, first of all, I still plan, and it's very COVID dependent, really, to leave sometime in late winter or early spring. And I just lost Lee again, sorry.
It's fine. I can hear you.
Okay. In terms of a retirement kind of thing, but again, a lot of it's just COVID dependent. So, but
Please leave your message for 5.
there's a window of opportunity, or there's that window that I'll probably use after I turn 65. So not, again, so much of it is COVID dependent right now. And then beyond that, I think Leah's got some updates for you with regard to the police response to the demonstrations, protests, and vandalism that occurred. So I yield the floor to Leah.
Oh, can I ask a clarifying question first,
Sure.
Mark? On the Rodriguez case, do you have an approximate timeline? I know we've been waiting to review that for a very long time.
Yeah, I kind of, I forgot to mention, we were trying to figure out how to time our home sales, and I suppose we timed it too early. And so, so it turned over in 6 days. So it's kind of been a scramble for us to find a place to live because there's no places to rent in Eugene, basically. And so that's kind of bogged it down. And it just, I don't have an exact time frame. I'm hoping I'll be done in the next couple of weeks. I don't know about the police, but I only have one chance to get it right. And so, again, I don't have the full, complete book, but I have the information that I need to make recommended adjudications to the chief. And so I don't know where they're at on it. I think it's probably on the chief's desk or the deputy chief's desk, but I don't know for certain. So it'll get wrapped up here pretty soon. Again, I wish sooner, but this has taken longer than normal because there are elements of it, and several policy issues that go beyond just the use of deadly force. So we're dealing with the de-escalation policy, we're dealing with the foot pursuit policy, and so again, it's taken a little bit longer because the sudden shock of our house being purchased quickly. And but it'll be soon. I wish I could give you a specific date, but I'm close enough. I have an outline, and I've started to write, so it shouldn't be too much longer.
Thanks, Mark. Leah?
All right, I am going to keep my video off and do my best, but I'm thinking what might be better is for me to email you a document I made today that basically just talks about the investigations that have been spawned, I guess, as a result of the incident reviews that look at the police response on May 29 through 31st. So we did an overview sort of incident review on all of the nights. And then we've developed reason to investigate several certain other incidents with various levels of classification. So I wrote that up today, and I can just email it to you guys, and feel free, please, to call or email with any questions or if you want to talk about it, especially with this community impact case. Since you guys are going to be getting to weigh in, I want to try to do this in a more proactive way, so it's not like you get the file and you're disappointed. I really want this to be a collaborative thing where you tell me if you think I'm missing something, sooner rather than later. Because we are still in the investigative process.
And I think
but I'll email that. No.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, and I think for the public, because this is, of course, something of great interest, we brought forward so far allegations of misconduct against 7 officers, and I think 5 or 6 are use of force allegations. So we want to be transparent with you guys about it, transparent with the public about that. It doesn't mean that they will be sustained, but these will involve then internal affairs investigations as a result of that conduct. So I wanted just to make sure that you guys understood, and Leah will have far more details in the email that she sends to you as well, but I just wanted to make you guys aware of it. And I don't know if I stepped out of my lane in terms of Leah's lane, but in any case, we can be transparent about that, and so we're going to be transparent about that. And so and certainly for on the police commission, training and policy issues are going to be of significance. I think the policy for dealing with demonstration and protests is 20 years old, probably from the last event. So again, those will be something for our police commission liaison to work with as well. But that's where they are. There's just thousands of hours of body-worn videos and things that they continue to look at. Leah and I think at least 4 members of EPD have been working very hard to do that. At the same time, they're sort of still active because of because of the state of readiness that they have in various locations. So, but in any case, that's where it is right now.
I don't feel like my lane was intruded on. We're good.
Thank you, too. Does anyone else have any questions for the auditor before we move on to closing comments? Bernadette, I see you.
Just a quick question the review that we agreed is going to be a community impact case. Because protests kept going on, is it limited the number of days that you guys are reviewing, as in those first, I think it was like 4 days that we were talking about? Or are we doing continued things that are going on? Or,
so because things slowed down, we are focused on May 29th through May 31st.
So a full month. Oh, wait, 4 days. May to May. Okay, sorry.
May to May.
May to May.
May to May. Don't scare me, Bernadette.
Okay.
We've had other flare-ups and other specific incidents that that have resulted in IAs, but those have not to date been included in your community impact case.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions before we move to closing comments? Okay. So, oh, go ahead, Leah. I hear you.
I'm sorry. I got a note that from Michael that he didn't understand he could vote for himself, and so I wanted to offer another poll if that's acceptable to you all.
I'm so sorry. I saw the thing flash up, and somehow just I thought, oh, of course we're not voting for ourselves. We're voting for two people other than ourselves. But I understand the votes happened. I was just sharing with Leia that.
If you wanted to open the vote again, yeah, I don't have a problem with reopening it, unless I mean, personally, I don't think it's an issue. Would anybody like? I mean, give me a thumbs up or thumbs down in your screen, people. Do you want to reopen the vote or not reopen the vote? I see 3 thumbs up. Jose and Rick and Bill seem agnostic. Okay, we've got more than half of us. So, Leah, if you could reopen the vote, that would be just fine.
Okay.
I heard Leia start to laugh as she was talking to Bernadette before, and I thought she just read my text.
That was being like, oh God, I gotta fix something. Okay, so I see 7 members have voted, and it is Rick and Lindsey. Could everyone hear me?
Yes.
Oh God, no one can hear me.
Yes, no, we can hear you. Can you hear me? Sorry, I was muted and fumbling for my unmute button.
You just said to me.
Okay, sorry, I will save these. I'm gonna stop talking now.
Okay.
She posted in the chat, Rick and Lindsey.
Okay, there it is. Okay. So we're at the closing comments portion of the evening. Does anybody want to volunteer to go first, and then I'll just go through the squares and call on the next person? Bill, I see you, and then Bernadette, you're going to be after Bill.
I just want to thank everybody, and then I would recommend the 2 people who are going to work on the new policies for the police department is to read the President Obama's report on policing in the 21st century. It really has some good information on how police, and that was done after the Ferguson incident, and it really is a good kind of guiding path to look at what police departments should be doing.
Thanks, Bill. Bernadette, and then it'll be Jose.
Thank you, Rick and Lindsey. Going forward to a task force of that many people is there'll be some herding cats there. I hope neither one of you get recommended to be the chair of that. I hope everybody is doing well. I know as we start to go indoors and teachers start to teach and kids start to go into buildings, there could be some irritation in our health systems coming up. So I hope everybody is able to stay healthy. Hopefully Oregon stays in the green and doesn't go by the way of Montana, Alaska, and just about everybody else that has gone. So wash your hands, wear your masks. Thank you.
Thanks, Bernadette. Jose, and then Rick.
I also want to say thanks to Lindsey and Rick, right, for assuming the burden of more work. Really appreciate that.
Rick, and then Michael.
Thank you for your vote of confidence. I'll do what I can.
No closing comments.
Carolyn, and then I'll close the meeting.
I don't think I have anything to add, except I appreciate this whole group and how we can discuss things even when we don't agree and work through them. And I look forward to having more case reviews as this committee of 7 people. It's a new one.
Thank you all for hanging in there. I know, Bernadette, it is a disappointment to not be able to have this meeting in person, because I totally agree. It's it's dry material on the best day, and it's even harder via Zoom and when we can't see each other and engage in the same kind of more natural way. So thank you all for being willing to add a meeting to talk about process. I think we've done a lot in a short period of time to try to make the processes better, and I'm confident that we'll continue to do that and provide transparency for the community. I agree, Carolyn, like that's my favorite thing about this board is that it's one of the few places I see in the public where people totally disagree and we still come to the table and do the work, and we still find ways to be courteous and to engage in processes together, particularly in the things that we can find agreement on. So I really think it's rare, and I think it's, I am very thankful for all of you for dedicating the time and showing up and making sure that we can continue to have these kinds of public processes. So I'm thankful and do not in any way take that for granted. I'm trying to see if I wrote any other things for myself. So there'll be some changes on the agenda for the September meeting based on the conversations that we've had today, and I'm excited about that. And unless there is some other particular thing that needs to happen, if there is, please raise your hand. I think that we're ready to adjourn the meeting and we can just meet again in September. So thank you. And Leah, I guess we'll be looking for some emails from you about the community impact case and what's going on with that. Oh, this is what I was going to say. That's why I had this note here. I want to say, Mark, I think that's the first time you've talked about retirement in a public meeting. And so I wanted to just say it's been a pleasure working with you. And I know you'll continue to be here for a while, but I just want to acknowledge like that's kind of a big announcement. So I hope that retirement is everything that you hope it will be, and I look forward to working with you here on this home stretch of your career. So thank you. And unless there's anything else, if we can just close the meeting and move on with our evenings. So thank you, everybody, and I'll see you in September.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.